They say a man becomes invisible in old age. That's not true. A man doesn't vanish. He is erased. Slowly. Deliberately. With every polite smile that forgets your name, with every text message that goes unanswered, with every look that passes through you like you were never there. My name is Nigel Lawrence. I live alone in a small house on the edge of a city I once helped build. The walls are tired but clean. The floor creaks when I walk to the kitchen each morning. I take my tea without sugar. Same chair. Same view. A peeling fence, a crooked mailbox, and a sky that no longer seems to care. I am 74 years old. I was not always this forgotten. Once, my voice filled boardrooms. People paused when I entered a room. My handshake opened doors, signed deals, saved lives. I didn't need to raise my voice, authority lived in the silence between my words. I protected my family like a shield in a war they never saw. But now my son sends me photos of his new condo instead of calling. My daughter writes birthday wishes like business memos, short, efficient, empty. My grandchildren visit when it's convenient, which is never. When they do come, they scroll through phones, nod out of obligation, and leave with forced hugs that smell like guilt. I went to the grocery store yesterday. Dropped a can. Bent to pick it up. No one stopped. Not even the cashier looked me in the eyes. At the clinic, the nurse spoke to me like a child. The doctor didn't speak to me at all, just to the tablet in his hand. I don't blame them. I don't expect kindness. But I notice. I remember. The world thinks I am gone. Irrelevant. Weak. A body waiting for permission to die. They are wrong. I am here. I see. I think. I do not sleep like I used to. I sit in silence with the TV on mute. Not to watch, but to observe how noise can pretend to be meaning. I sip my tea and feel the cold creep into my bones. Not age, something colder. Something harder. The anger came softly. Like fog crawling in from the edge of the sea. It settled in my chest. At first, I mistook it for sadness. For grief. For regret. But no, sadness is quiet. This was heavier. This was heat. This was the sound of forgotten footsteps waking up in my head. They think I've lost everything. But they forget what I still have. Time. Memory. Silence. And silence is the loudest weapon in the world. I have not spoken to anyone in days. Weeks. Time slips now. But in the quiet, my mind sharpens. I remember every favor, every betrayal, every eye that once looked at me with respect, now turned away. I am not seeking their love. I do not want their pity. But something inside me, something I buried a long time ago, has opened its eyes. I'm not dead. I'm just getting started. There was a time I didn't need to remind anyone who I was. Back then, the city looked different, less polished, more alive. Skyscrapers were still dreams on paper. And I was the kind of man people turned to when everything was falling apart. I started with nothing. No favors. No inheritance. Just a fire that refused to burn out. I built my first company out of a garage that smelled like oil and concrete. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. I hired people who needed second chances, ex-cons, drunks in recovery, immigrants with broken English but fire in their eyes. I made them believe in themselves. That's what leadership is. Not shouting. Not domination. Just showing people who they could be. I never cheated. Never stole. Others did. I saw them. I outplayed them. I didn't need to lie to win. Strategy was my weapon. Patience was my armor. In the 90s, when the economy cracked and families bled out trying to hold on, I took loans on my house to keep my employees paid. I drove the rusted van myself to deliver orders. My wife cried, begged me to stop. But I couldn't. I wouldn't let people sink on my watch. When my son was in college, he called once at midnight. Dad, my tuition's late. I wired the money before sunrise. He never asked how I got it. He never asked what I sold. It wasn't a car. It was a piece of my life. I fought off corporate raiders who tried to get my company from the inside. I stood in courtrooms, boardrooms, basements. Always prepared. Always calm. My word meant something. And still, look at me now. They forgot. Forgot how I carried them all on my back while they dreamed of softer futures. Forgot the meetings I took bleeding from ulcers. The times I skipped meals to pay theirs. Forgot the men who broke bones in silence so no one else would feel pain. My phone is silent now. My name, once spoken with weight, is barely a memory. And I sit here. Alone. Watching them smile on magazine covers, sipping wine in penthouses, tweeting about legacy and grind culture. I laugh quietly. Because I know the price they never saw being paid behind the curtain. And yet, I'm not bitter. Not quite. Just observant. Because when you've built empires from dust and carried betrayal on your back, you don't forget how to play the game. You just wait. Wait for the board to clear. Wait for the moment the kings and queens forget that the old men watching from the side once taught them how to move. They forgot what I am. But I remember. It's not the big betrayals that break you. It's the small ones. The everyday dismissals. The quiet ways people teach you you're no longer worth their time. The first time I called my son and he let it go to voicemail, I told myself he was busy. The second time, I heard laughter in the background before the click. No call back. No text. Just silence. Now, I don't even bother. I watch his face on interviews, hear him speak about self-made success, and I smile bitterly. He never mentions the men who mortgaged his future to pay for that polished present. My grandson came over last week. I asked him to help me fix the old radio, just needed a new fuse. He rolled his eyes, mumbled something about YouTube tutorials, and went back to his phone. I watched him scroll. Watched his fingers flick through photos, memes, women, crypto charts, as if real life was happening elsewhere. Then he laughed. Looked at me and said, "You know, Grandpa, you're kind of like a background character. Like from another timeline or something." He didn't mean it cruelly. That's what hurt most. In the clinic, I waited 2 hours to be seen. My knees hurt. My back locked up. The nurse glanced at me like I was a piece of luggage someone forgot. "Someone get the old guy," she said to the intern. "He's barely coherent anyway." Barely coherent. I remember sitting on national panels, debating policy and finance with senators. Now I need to repeat my birthday 3 times before someone takes me seriously. Last week I dropped a plastic bag outside the corner store. Bent down to pick it up. A woman stepped over me like I was street trash. Didn't even look. No one does anymore. But I see them. Every name. Every smirk. Every slight. I write them down. In the notebook no one knows I keep. Dates. Words. Expressions. Who laughed? Who turned away? Who looked through me like I wasn't there? It's not paranoia. It's accounting. Because I may walk slower now, but I still remember how to calculate risk. Still know how to find pressure points. Still know how to break an empire, not with force, but with a whisper. I used to think I was alone in this. But loneliness is a myth. What I feel isn't isolation, it's containment. Like a dam holding back the weight of everything I've swallowed. Gratitude never asked for. Respect never returned. Love that soured into convenience. I can feel the pressure building. It's not rage. Rage is loud and stupid. This is deeper. Colder. Like something ancient waking up after a long winter. And when it wakes, they won't see me coming. Because no one watches the shadows. It happened on a Tuesday. No warning. No drama. I had gone to the small market at the corner. Bought tea, bread, aspirin. My hands were colder than usual, shaking slightly as I carried the 2 plastic bags. Crossing the street, I slipped. My hip didn't break. Just my dignity. The bags burst open, scattering apples across the pavement like dice. A bottle cracked. Someone laughed. 2 teenagers. One of them said something, "Get Grandpa a walker." No one offered a hand. I stayed down for a moment longer than I needed to. And that's when I heard it. Not the laughter. Not the indifference. But the sentence that tore through every layer of restraint I'd spent decades building. Just leave him. He's no one. No one. Strange, isn't it? How 2 words can open a door that was welded shut for years. I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. I didn't speak. Didn't even glare. I just walked home, the plastic cutting into my hands, the silence in my head now sharp enough to slice. When I reached the door, I didn't put the groceries away. I went straight to the study. The one I never open anymore. Pulled the faded rug aside. Pried the floorboard loose. Reached into the darkness. The old safe was still there. I spun the code with muscle memory older than my children's first words. Inside, a phone. A leather-bound notebook. A small black USB drive. And a list. A very specific list. Names from the past. People who owed me. People who had vanished when the spotlight faded. People who had debts. I charged the phone. Numbers still worked. Even after all these years. Then I turned to the shelves. Old files. Discs. Documents no one knew I still had. Photos of handshakes that should have never happened. Contracts signed in shadows. Whispers on paper that could tear lives apart. I didn't feel rage. I felt focus. People think power is a fire. Something bright. Something loud. No. True power is cold. It is quiet hands moving unseen. It is knowing who to call, and when not to speak at all. That night, I sat at the table and opened the notebook. Wrote 4 words. The game begins again. I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Not out of pain. But anticipation. I had spent years in the silence of a forgotten life. Now, I would use that silence as my mask. They wouldn't see me. But they'd feel the consequences. Because this isn't about revenge. This is about restoration. A correction. The man they buried is not the one rising. No. The one rising never needed love. He needed justice. I never knocked on a door. Never raised my voice. Never signed a single threat. And still, they fell. The first was my son. Elliot had built himself into a corporate messiah. Sustainability. Innovation. A glossy brand built on buzzwords and borrowed capital. What the world didn't see, I did. I had the emails. The altered audits. The shell accounts. He should have been more careful with his secrets. I sent them, anonymously, through a journalist I once helped escape a scandal. She owed me. She remembered. In less than a week, the article broke. Headlines. Public outcry. Shares collapsed. Sponsors fled. His board removed him, in the best interest of the company. I watched his press conference on mute. Eyes puffy. Tie crooked. Apologizing to a world that no longer applauded. The silence after applause is louder than thunder. Next came my grandson. Jared. A rising tech influencer. Deals, endorsements, NFTs, whatever currency attention came in now. His ego had no brakes. His cruelty was casual, thoughtless, especially toward those beneath him. He laughed at me. Once. So I reached out to an old hacker. A prodigy I mentored when he was 15 and lost. I paid for his school when no one else believed in him. Now, he controlled doors most people didn't know existed. Jared's private group chats leaked, mocking fans, outing fake deals, screenshots of manipulated hype tactics. The outrage was instant. A sponsorship pulled. Then another. Then all of them. A carefully constructed identity burned in 48 hours. He called me. I let it ring. There's a special silence in watching someone realize the floor is gone beneath their feet, and not knowing who removed it. The others. Smaller targets. The doctor who mocked me. Lost his license when complaints surfaced, anonymous but documented in detail. The banker who once swindled me out of a deal. His mistress found out about his second family. And his boss found out about both. No threats. No fingerprints. Just consequences. Some nights, I sat by the window, tea in hand, watching the wind move dead leaves across the street. No celebration. No smile. Just a deep, still knowing. They remembered me now. They didn't say it aloud. But the calls came. Voicemails. Apologies. Uncertainty laced with desperation. I didn't answer. Because now, I was the shadow. I had become the man who watches the wolves and makes them think twice before they bare their teeth. I didn't need to roar. I only needed them to wonder. And wonder they did. The strange thing about fear is how quiet it becomes when it finally reaches the right heart. My children arrived first. Not together, of course not. They came one by one, as if afraid the other might overhear their shame. Elliot stood on my porch in a wrinkled suit, his confidence dissolved into a boyish uncertainty I hadn't seen since he was 17. He hovered at the door, waiting for me to open it. I didn't. He let himself in. My daughter followed 2 days later, makeup smudged from crying, though she tried to hide it behind sunglasses. She tiptoed through my home like a stranger stepping into a church she once abandoned. And the grandchildren, they came last. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand. They only knew something had changed, something heavy, invisible, shaping the air around their lives like a storm that had no lightning, yet shook foundations all the same. They all sat in my living room. Awkward. Fidgeting. Breathing too loudly. They didn't dare raise their voices. Didn't dare blame me. Didn't dare walk away. Good. For the first time in years, they looked at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. My grandson opened his mouth to speak, but I lifted a hand. Silence. The very thing they drowned me in for years became the thing that mastered them now. I saw fear. I saw guilt. I saw the fragile truth of who they were without the world applauding. And for a single moment, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Clarity. They were not monsters. They were simply people who forgot how to be human. I stood slowly, bones stiff but unbroken. Their eyes followed me with reverence I hadn't felt in decades. Not respect, no, respect is learned. This was something older. Recognition. I wrote my final entry in the notebook that night. Not for them. For me. Strength does not leave a man. It waits. And when the world thinks he has nothing left, he finally becomes what he was always meant to be. I closed the notebook. Placed it in the drawer. Extinguished the lamp. And for the first time in years, I slept with the peace of a man who no longer needed revenge. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I no longer cared whether they asked. There is a stage of life beyond anger, beyond love, beyond the petty noise of being needed or ignored. It is the stage where you finally see everything. Clearly. Coldly. Honestly. Old age is not weakness. It is X-ray vision. And they will never underestimate me again.
Subscribe and like this video, more interesting revenge stories of elderly people coming soon.